We're going to stable to dismiss count 2 of the offense.
Subject to the terms of the plea agreement, this matter, the court hereby dismisses count 2 of the indictment upon motion of the state of Ohio. So we were looking at sentencing after May 22. I have some time late morning or 8 o'clock on Monday, June. Anything else, Mr. Perez?
Judge, as you can see from the defendant's outfit, he's under a serious no contact order. And after reviewing the information that we have, we will ask the no contact order to be modified only to as to John Luzan, James Griffiths, and Kyle Elson.
Okay. Any objection, attorney fees to that modification?
Your Honor, I just conferred with my client who represents no objection.
Okay. Court will grant that modification of no contact.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Analysis hearing is concluded.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Well,
ball rolling. I'll make myself a note. It's going to be late today. So you guys can go down the hall. Our two of us are going to talk to Molly and Lisa.
I'll swear. Who's gonna do the video? Make sure it gets on or not. Yes, ma'am.
I had looked at my email and we're not having a lot. It what fizzled out. Well, I got it here. I will be right back.
Trying to get all my B-roll shots out of it now.
Since I retired. No. Yeah. Blood pressures. And eat some good food. You know, just pretty much. I mean, every now and then, not like not a lot of pasta. That's right, bacon. Love the bacon. Yeah, you can have bacon and eggs. Burgers, just no buns. We just have no buns. I did it. It's
I know we're waiting on a call.
process of the state's case in chief being presented. And we're ready for your next witness, Mr. Janelle.
State call Sarah Fairchild, Your Honor.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you have given tonight to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes.
Could you tell us your name, please?
Sarah Fairchild.
And how are you currently employed?
I work for Family Life Counseling in Mansfield, Ohio.
Okay, what is Family Life Counseling?
It's a counseling agency. I operate as a case manager.
And was there a time when you worked for the Salvation Army in Ashland?
Yes.
And what did you do for the Salvation Army?
The last job I had there was as social service coordinator.
And how long did you work there?
In total, 11 years.
And how long were you the social service coordinator?
Approximately 5.
Okay. And when did you leave the employ of the Salvation Army?
January of 2017.
And what does the social service coordinator do?
I acted as a supervisor over our social service department. So I oversaw our other staff members, the food pantry. I did intake and case management for the Access program, which is a homeless program. I also assessed when individuals were homeless, they would come to us to see what housing options were available to them. So I would assess that and direct them from there, whether it be the Access program or short-term hotel or housing relationships as far as finding rentals.
And are there other services that the Salvation Army was providing through social services?
Yes, they have a hot meal and a food pantry.
Okay. And you were the coordinator over all of those programs?
Ultimately, yes.
What's your educational background?
I have an associate's degree in human services.
Was there a time when you met a gentleman by the name of Shawn Grate?
Yes.
And do you recall when you first met Shawn Grate?
Yes.
When was that?
I believe it's dated on the intake sheet, July 22nd. July 22nd, I think, is when I first met him, and then the intake sheet is dated for July 25th.
Okay, and what was the circumstance that brought you into his contact on the 22nd?
He had said that he had come from Mansfield and that he was staying in Ashland and that he didn't really want to stay where he was, but that he was okay for the weekend, so he agreed to come meet with me on Monday. And I believe he had said that he had found somewhere to stay with a friend of his mother's, and so we didn't really provide any other services.
Okay, and what year would this be?
2016?
So August 22nd of 2016?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, yes, August.
And I'm sorry, July.
Yeah, July.
All right.
Whatever's dated there on the intake sheet.
Right. So you didn't fill out an intake sheet at that time?
No, my mother-in-law had to go to work, and so I was rushing out. I believe I met him in the lobby, and he said he was okay for the weekend. I said, so we'll meet again on Monday.
Okay. And did you then meet on Monday?
Yes.
And what did you do on Monday?
Learn more about his situation, what his needs were. Learned that he had found a place to stay, and then I had just explained the other services that we had at the Croc Center, the hot meal, and we have a shower that was open to use for the public.
Okay. The Sheriff Defense Counsel states Exhibit 348, 349. Show you what we marked for purposes of identification as states Exhibit 348. Do you recognize that?
Yes,
What is that?
that is our agency intake sheet.
Now, what is the agency intake sheet?
When somebody is applying for services, we have them fill out an intake sheet that asks information, the year of their birth, their address, their income, their expenses, and it has a release of information at the bottom. It also asks what other services in the community you've used.
And then it's signed and dated
Yes,
by whom?
Shawn signed and dated it.
And that was in your presence?
Yes.
And what services was he looking for?
I could read the notes. It says here that he was here for help with shelter. He was living in Mansfield, but he said his girlfriend was abusive and he left her, and then he started staying with an acquaintance he had met through his mother. He said he had an interview the following day at Save-A-Lot, so I gave him a list of landlords and a slip for pantry for residency proof. So if somebody doesn't have proof of residency, then I write a note saying that we'll serve them regardless for the food pantry, and then they'll serve them. And then I advised him to contact me when he's ready for an app fee or an application fee. So if he got his job at Save-A-Lot and then was looking for rental assistance, we would have been able to provide him with an application fee.
And did you see him again in follow-up to this application?
Yes, it says here on the 27th, 2 days later, that he had gotten the job at Save-A-Lot, and then he starts the next morning, and he asked me for help setting up a phone he had. And so we had called Straight Talk together, and we were told that the phone card was not compatible. So he said he was going to try to return the phone, or the card, excuse me, and there really wasn't any one-on-one after the fact.
Okay. With respect to that form, is that a form that was used by you as you conducted the regular business activities of the Salvation Army?
Yes.
And is it a form that was completed in part by yourself
Yes.
and signed in your presence by Shawn Grate?
Yes.
And then once this form is signed and completed, is it then kept with the records of the regularly conducted business of the Salvation Army?
Yes.
And does this appear to be a true and accurate copy of the form as you created it and saw it signed by Shawn Grate on July 25th, 2016?
Yes.
Now, following contact with Shawn Grate referenced this form and some services. Did you see him then at the Kroc Center?
Yes, frequently.
But you didn't have direct contact with him?
No. It was mostly just in passing, maybe a hello, how are you, every now and then.
And did you know an Elizabeth Griffith?
Yes. Yes.
And how did you know Elizabeth?
Elizabeth frequented the community meal.
And would you have contact with her?
Yes, I've talked with Elizabeth many different times.
How about a Lori Spillick?
Yes.
And how did you know Lori Spillick?
She had always just been a part of the Salvation Army family. She had volunteered at different times and had frequently attended the community meal since I had begun with Salvation Army in 2005.
And did you have occasion at any point in time to see 2 or 3 of those individuals together?
Mostly, I'd seen Shawn and Lori together just walking around town, as I live in Ashland.
Okay. So you know them and you'd spot them as you went around town?
As we all do in small communities.
Sure. Now, your duties as the social services coordinator also put you in charge of the food pantry?
We had a supervisor, but I was her supervisor.
Okay. And what is the food pantry at the Salvation Army?
It's your traditional sense of a food pantry. We receive food from Cleveland Food Bank. It's a self-choice pantry, so individuals choose what they can use. Folks can come. We had different things set up at different times. So at first, people can come as often as they needed, but it began to be too much. And I think when I had left, we were up to 2 times a month individuals can come.
And is there also lunch provided by the Salvation Army?
Yes.
How does that work?
It's the same idea. We don't need an intake or anything for that. If individuals just want to come in and have lunch. There's no income guidelines. They just sign the sheet, so we know how many we served that day, and then they have lunch.
And when is lunch offered?
I believe lunch was offered at 11:45, Monday through Friday.
Okay. And when did lunch stop?
12:15, 12:30, or until it was done.
Until, okay.
Yeah.
And you said there's a sign-in sheet?
Mm-hmm.
What is the purpose of the sign-in sheet?
If I recall, it was mostly just to track how many individuals we served.
Okay, and what information is collected on the sign-in sheet?
It usually sat at the front desk, and I didn't have much to do with it, but I believe it just had the name and the date.
Okay, and then after each lunch, was the sign-in sheet collected?
Yes,
And then was it kept?
yes.
Show you what we've marked as State's Exhibit 349.
Yep,
And you recognize what that stack of documents is?
yes.
What is it?
This is our sign-in sheet for lunch.
Okay, if you look at the,
Oh, I'm sorry, this is actually just a general sign-in sheet. So anybody who would come into the building would sign this. It wasn't just for lunch.
okay. So that way you see who's coming in and out of the building?
It's safety reasons. If there was a fire or something like that, we can make sure everybody's accounted for. I believe that was the main reason why we started this, thinking
Okay.
back to it now.
And then those documents then are kept by the Salvation Army?
Yes,
With all the other records of Salvation Army business?
yes,
And as the coordinator for social services, you have access to these documents?
if I needed them, yes, but it wasn't kept with my files.
Okay, but you have access to those, it's under,
Yep,
would you look at the first document there and tell us what date that sign-in sheet is for?
May 31st, 2016.
And if you would, take a look at the last sheet and tell us what the last date.
Friday, September 9th, 2016.
Okay. So what does that collection of documents appear to cover?
It covers spring to summer, the individuals that had come into the Croc Center.
Okay. And that particular packet there, that's kept in the regular course of Salvation Army business?
Yes,
And it's created for the business purposes of the Salvation Army?
yes,
And it's kept with the regularly recorded activity of the Salvation Army?
I believe so, yes.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Cross-examine.
No question, Judge, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You're excused.
State will call Jimmy Sue. Jimmy Sue.
Jimmy Sue. solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as you should answer for God?
Yes.
Okay, have a seat and speak into the microphone.
Will do.
Good morning, sir.
How do you do?
All right. What's your name?
Jimmy Sue.
And spell your last name for the court reporter, please.
HSU.
Okay. And how are you employed?
I am employed at how? My partner and I, we open dental practices, and so yeah, under a dental practice.
Okay. Now, speak up real loud so everybody in the courtroom can hear you, okay?
Oh, okay, will do.
What is your dental practice called?
Alpha Dental.
And do you have a particular title?
I do. It's the director.
Okay, so you are the director for Alpha Dental.
Correct.
And this is a series of dental clinics?
It is. We're a group dentistry.
Okay, and how many locations do you have?
We actively have 6.
All right. And what do you do as the director?
I basically go around auditing all of the offices. I operate, do marketing. I also oversee all the charts and make sure that the clinical directors, which are the doctors, are actually properly entering notes and making sure that whatever they do enter in is proper and valid legally as well.
Okay. And how are patient records kept?
We are all digital office, and we also have, before 2016, it was all paper charts, but after 2016, we digitalized everything. So they are all in the computer, basically on servers.
Okay. Does that include the pre-2006 charts?
That's correct.
Okay.
16, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, 2016.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, what sort of information is kept within a particular patient's records?
Any kind of x-rays, doctor's notes, lab slips, ledgers, and any kind of pre-authorizations, insurances, and their ID, and any photos we have of them.
Okay. When you say ID, what do you mean?
I mean their state ID, anything government issued.
And why do you keep that information?
So we can properly, well, to explain it, it's like when someone comes with an insurance card, the insurance card doesn't have their photo ID on it. So then in order for us to know that it's actually them using the insurance, we look at their photo ID so we don't get in trouble either.
And so you collect that sort of information to conduct the regular business of Alpha Dental?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you oversee and have access to those records?
Correct.
I'm going to show States Exhibit 350 and 351, Defense Counsel. I'll show you what we've marked as States Exhibit 350.
Okay.
Can you tell us what that is?
That's a driver's license. Oh, well, actually, sorry, identification card for this particular person. State government issued.
And is that the sort of ID that would be kept in an individual's file?
Yes.
Was there an Elizabeth Griffith that was a patient or client of Alpha Dental in Ashland?
Yes.
Where's the Ashland location?
It's on 1445 Claremont Avenue in Ashland.
And she was a patient?
She was a patient, yes.
So as a patient, you would have collected her ID?
Yes, correct.
And is States Exhibit 350, in fact, a copy of the ID on file in Alpha Dental's record?
Yes, it is.
I'll show you States Exhibit 351. Can you identify that set of documents?
And that is a panoramic x-ray of Elizabeth Griffin.
What part of Elizabeth Griffith?
It's for the entire panoramic view of the mouth. Includes the jawline and up to the sinus cavity, including all of the dentition.
And are those, was that also a record held by Alpha Dental?
Yes, we hold this digitally as well.
Okay. Do you have the ability then to transmit those records digitally?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and were you aware that at some point in 2016, September of 2016, the Ashland Police Department needed Elizabeth Griffith's dental records?
Yes.
And those dental records, were they transmitted then to the Ashland Police Department?
Yes, it was.
Would that have been in paper or electronic?
I brought both.
Okay.
We provided both.
So, in States Exhibits 350 and 351, those are records of Alpha Dental,
Yes, they are.
and they were made in the regular course of Alpha Dental's business,
Yes, they were.
and they were held pursuant to the records policy of Alpha Dental.
Yes, they were.
And are they true and accurate copies of documents within Alpha Dental's records?
Yes, they were. Are.
They would still be there.
Yes, yeah, they still are.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further.
Cross-examine.
No questions, Judge, thank you.
Thank you. Your excuse, sir.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Gary Alden.
Sir, would you turn and raise your hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you will give in this matter should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Would you tell us your name, please?
Yes, my name is Gary Alting.
And how are you employed?
I work for the City of Ashland, Ohio, the Division of Police.
And how long have you been with the Division of Police?
Next month will be 23 years.
And what are your current duties with the Division of Police?
I'm a lieutenant. I'm assigned to our detective division, where I supervise that unit.
And when did you become the lieutenant and supervisor of the Detective Bureau?
Last year, February of 2017.
And who did you take over for?
At the time, it was a vacant spot. I took over for Captain Lay, who returned to his position in the administrative offices.
Okay, so Captain Lay would have been in charge of that bureau in September of 2016?
That is correct.
And were you in the Detective Bureau at that time?
I was.
What was your role?
I was a sergeant, first line supervisor, and I was a direct report to Captain Lay.
And do you recall the days leading up to September 13th, 2016?
I do.
And were you involved at all in investigating a missing persons report, a woman by the name of Elizabeth Griffith?
Yes, I believe it was Friday of that week. I accompanied Captain Lay on a couple of follow-ups that he made, one in the city and one out in the county.
Okay. And did that involve going to Elizabeth Griffith's apartment?
No, I did not accompany him to that
Okay, so
location.
you didn't go along on that,
That's correct.
all right? And was the police department at that time actively engaged in looking for Elizabeth Griffith?
Yes,
So there were multiple members of your department trying to follow up on that missing persons report.
That is correct.
And then at some point, following the Friday that you were with Captain Lay looking for Elizabeth Griffith, did you become aware of a missing person by the name of Stacy Stanley?
I did.
And when were you made aware of that situation?
I had heard about it, I believe, over the weekend. I do know that by Monday, I know that our agency was investigating this missing persons with, it was reported by, I believe, the Huron County Sheriff's Office. I actually was called out that weekend on a death investigation, and I was actually tied up with that Sunday and Monday.
Okay, so that was another matter separate completely from this.
It was. That's what I was concentrating on for those 2 days.
And then do you recall the morning of September 13th?
I do.
And what happened then?
I was notified by Captain Lay that it would have been about 7:45, 7:44 in the morning, that myself and the other 2 detectives in the unit needed to respond right away to the station.
And what was happening when you arrived on station?
What I knew was that there was a abduction and rape investigation that was going on at a residence on Covert Court. A suspect was being held, and the victim was being brought to the station, and that's all I had initially when I came in.
Okay, and we've had prior testimony that Captain Lay and Detective Major were engaged in interviewing both victim and suspect that day.
Correct.
And Detective Evans was at the scene on Covert Court
Yes.
for the better part of the day.
Yes.
What was your role, if any, initially with respect to Covert Court?
I made contact with 2 witnesses that, when sharing information with the other investigators, one was the clerk who worked at the BP station where one of the victims, Stacy Stanley Hicks, had been last seen.
Okay.
And there was also, I found out there was a family friend identified as Wayne Bright who had come up to assist her with changing a tire that had gone flat, and I sought him out to speak with him.
Okay. So let's start with the BP. Which location, which BP station?
Main Street and Union Street, City of Ashland.
And you made contact with the clerk there?
I did. Not at that location, at a residence where he was living at the time, out on 42 North.
Okay. Nathaniel Keck?
That is correct.
All right. So you spoke to Nathaniel Keck. Did you make an effort to retrieve surveillance video from the BP at Main and Union?
I was unable to because it was not operating, so we weren't able to get any video from there.
All right. And then you spoke to Mr. Bright?
I did, later that afternoon.
Okay. And I take it you interviewed Mr. Bright?
I did.
Did you also take a look at his cell phone?
I did.
And did you take a picture of Wayne Bright's cell phone?
I did.
What was your purpose in taking that picture?
I wanted to document an incoming call that he had got from Stacy. He explained to me that she had called him so he could have her updated number on his phone.
I'll show you State's Exhibit 211. Can you identify that photograph?
Yes, this is a photograph that I took of Wayne Bright's call history on his flip phone. It's marked State's Exhibit 211.
Okay. Now, at some point, did you speak with a Corey Stanley?
I did.
And who is Corey Stanley?
He is Stacy Stanley Hicks's son.
And we've had prior testimony here that he had phone contact as well with Stacy
Yes, he did.
on that particular evening. Did you examine his telephone?
I did, that same evening, September 13th.
And what'd you do reference his phone?
I took photographs to document call history back and forth, or also text messages back and forth between him and his mother's phone.
I'll show you State's Exhibit 206. Can you identify that photograph?
I can. This is a photograph that I took of Corey's phone, marked State's Exhibit 206, and it is a text message exchange between him and his mother that evening. Or I'm sorry, the evening of the 8th of September.
And again, what was your purpose in photographing that phone?
I wanted to document this exchange of text messages.
And are both those exhibits fair and accurate copies of the phone as you viewed them?
Yes, they are. Or yes, this is, and yes, that is also.
At some point, did you travel to a location known as the Kroc Center?
I did.
And what was your purpose in going there?
And again, in the course of the investigation, we learned that the defendant and two of the victims in this investigation frequented there around the same time of day. I also learned that the defendant had signed in there and registered for services that the Kroc Center provided back in July of 2016. So I went there to get those records, and to I did have an opportunity to speak with Sarah Fairchild as well, who is a social worker there.
And was the Kroc Center able to provide you the records that you were looking for?
Yes, they did.
State's Exhibit 348.
Yes.
Can you tell us what that is?
I can. State's Exhibit 348 is a Salvation Army Kroc Center application, if you will. It's filled out by Shawn Grate. Looks like on the 8th, no, on the 25th of July, 2016. And attached are notes and an intake sheet.
All right, and that's the document you collected off the Kroc Center, part of the investigation?
That is correct.
Okay. The date, July 25th, 2016. Throughout the course of the Ashland Police Department's investigation into these matters, the whereabouts, movements of Shawn Grate, is there an earlier documented date to find him in Ashland than July 25th?
No, I do have a statement from a previous witness that he came in on the 22nd, but Ms. Fairchild wasn't able to meet with him because of prior engagement, so she told him to come back.
And
So,
in fact, Ms. Fairchild just testified in the same.
okay,
So in that July 22 to 25 range,
that is correct.
and throughout your interviews with various subjects relating to this, that's the earliest you can put him in the city of Ashland?
That is correct.
State's Exhibit 349. You recognize that collection of documents?
I do.
What is that?
This is a collection of, it's a copy of the sign-in sheets from the Ashland Kroc Center that I collected. It begins, it's actually marked State's Exhibit 349. It begins May 31st, 2016, which is a Tuesday, and the last one is the week beginning September 6th, all of 2016.
And as your part in this investigation, did you review those documents?
I did.
And at the time you began collecting those documents and reviewing them, were you aware that there were 3 victims in the city of Ashland? Or 2 victims, I'm sorry? No, I'm sorry. 3.
There would have been 3, yeah, and that's correct. I did know that by this time.
But 2 that would have frequented the Croc Center?
That is correct.
Who would that be?
That would be Elizabeth Griffith and victim Lori Spillick.
Okay. And what were you reviewing those records for?
I wanted to see any correlation or connection from when they signed in, and to see any times when both those 2 and even the suspect in this case, Grate, would have signed in.
Okay. And did you find their names within those records?
I did.
What can you tell us about, let's say, Elizabeth Griffith's habits reference the Croc Center?
She would come in around lunchtime. For example, beginning the week starting Tuesday the 31st, they were closed for Memorial Day. She and Lori both came in. I marked here, I highlighted them on the originals that I got, like Elizabeth came in at 10:30, for example, that day. And as you go through that week, she comes in on the 2nd, the 6th. I'm sorry, not Elizabeth. She came in on the 9th. So she was periodically coming in, maybe once or twice a week, for lunch.
And were you able to find a reference to Shawn Grate within those documents?
I did.
When
Yes.
is the first reference to Shawn Grate?
The first sign-in, if I can turn to it here. The first sign-in I found of him was actually the 27th of July, and that would have been the second time that he met with Sarah Fairchild, and I highlighted it on this sheet.
Okay, and is there a name that is of interest to us in the same range on the sign-in sheet?
Yep, Lori signed in above him. They both signed in at 11:26 a.m., and the timeout was 12:10 p.m.
And the sign-out time was the same for both of them?
That is correct.
And prior to that, within the records, the 2 of them don't appear together?
No, not that I was able to find.
And then going forward in time, were there more instances where those 2 names appear next to each other?
Yes.
How frequently?
Well, I can tell you again on the 29th, I'm sorry, the 28th, July 28th, 2016. They were there the same day on the 2nd of August, however, different times. We believe, from what I could tell, it was the 3rd together, up to the 11th. So again, frequency of every couple of days he would show up. And there were days where he and Lori were there together.
But not every day?
No.
Now, did you also, throughout the course of the investigation, or during the course of the investigation, have occasion to travel to Cuyahoga County Coroner's Office and the BCI Ridgefield?
I did.
When was that? If you recall.
I believe it was in October. I can't give you the exact date without notes, but I do know that I went there with Captain Lay and Beth Jackenheimer from the coroner's office.
Okay, and what was your purpose in making that trip?
We collected biological samples and some evidence from Cuyahoga County, and some of it was prearranged to transfer it to the BCI at Richfield, to that lab. And then from there, we also, I believe, transferred some evidence from BCI back to Ashland.
Okay. At a later date?
I believe so.
Okay. And the transfer back, show you here, State's Exhibit 120.
Okay.
Recognize what that is?
I do.
What is it?
This is an Ashland Police Division evidence log, marked State's Exhibit 120. It's a copy. And it is documenting items that were found at the scene, and it shows the chain of custody for these items.
Okay, and does it document your handling of certain items of evidence?
Yes.
And what items of evidence did you handle?
I transferred, I'm gonna have to refer to this. Okay, here we go. Item number 11 was a bag containing unknown property found at the scene. Anyway, it shows me with Lay returning this stuff, picking it up at, taking it from evidence and taking it to BCI Richfield on the 30th. I picked up another item on the 39th, and I actually relinquished it to the FBI for an exam to a local agent. It shows me logging that back into evidence on November 22nd.
Okay, which item was that?
It's item 39 it shows on here, which would have been a paper bag containing VHS camera.
At some point, did you return to BCI and collect an item of evidence?
I would have, yes.
What was that?
On this sheet, I got it right here. Let me look. There's several items. I'm showing, I'd have to refer to this. There's several items on here.
I'm going to show you what we marked as State's Exhibit 122.
Okay.
122 is item 12.
It's right here.
BCI note.
I've got it right here, item 12.
What did you do with Exhibit 122?
I picked that up at BCI Richfield on the 6th of January of 2017 and transported it back to the police department, where it was secured in evidence at that same day, the 6th, at 1:20 p.m.
Okay, and there's Exhibit 122 appeared to be in substantially similar condition as to when you brought it back from BCI.
It does.
All right, I'll show you what we marked as State's Exhibit 199. What is 199?
This is an Ashland Police Division evidence log. It is a copy of an evidence log filled out by Officer Newman. And the item in particular is a silver quickset key.
Now, does it document your handling of the silver quickset key?
It does.
We'll show you what we marked as Stacy Exhibit 198.
Do you recognize that item?
I do.
What is that?
Item 198 is paper bag, an evidence bag. It says containing the silver quickset key.
And what did you do with the silver quickset key?
On the 21st of October of 2016, I relinquished this to Ed Staley, his agent with BCI, and I returned it to the Sallyport evidence cage same day, the 21st at 2:15 p.m.
And does State's Exhibit 198 appear to be in substantially similar condition as when you had custody and control of it?
Yes, it does.
You can tell us what State's Exhibit 201 is, please?
Okay, 201 is a photocopy of an Ashland Police Division evidence log, again filled out by Officer Newman. It reads a quick, item number 1, quick set lock from 242 Matthews Avenue, apartment L.
And does it demonstrate your handling of that item of evidence?
It does. It shows that on the 21st of October of 2016, again at 2:05 p.m., I relinquished this to Agent Ed Staley of BCI, and then I returned it to evidence from him at 2:15 p.m. that day.
And you recognize State's Exhibit 200?
I do.
What is State's 200?
This is the evidence bag that it reads containing the quick set lock, which matches what is on this evidence sheet.
And does State's Exhibit 200 appear to be in substantially similar condition as you had custody and control?
It does.
Show you State's Exhibit 274. Can you identify that?
This is a copy of an Ashland Police Division evidence log. It was filled out by Officer Eggerman, and it shows 7 items of evidence that he recovered.
And does it include a sexual assault kit?
It does. It would be item number 7 on this sheet.
And item number 7 contained on the sheet, does that form demonstrate your handling of that item of evidence itself?
It does. It shows, it shows that I was with Lay when we retrieved it from, when we transferred it to BCI Richfield, again on the 30th of September of 2016. And then it shows that I picked it up at BCI Richfield on the 6th of January 2017, and then I returned it to the Sallyport evidence cage where it was secured.
I'll show you State's Exhibit 257. Do you recognize that exhibit?
I do. This 257 is a Ohio Department of Health sexual assault evidence collection kit. And this would be the item marked number 7 that was retrieved by Eggerman.
Okay. And that is the same sexual assault kit then that you picked up at BCI and transferred to Sallyport evidence cage?
It is.
And does it appear to be in substantially similar condition to when it was in your custody?
It does.
At some point during the course of the investigation, did you travel to a business location known as Nails 2?
I did.
For what purpose?
Information received during the investigation indicated that victim Stacy Stanley Hicks had gone there to get her nails done, her fingernails done, before the flat tire.
And did you make contact with anybody there?
I did.
Who was that?
I believe he's the owner, but he's the manager. He's referred to as Sonny.
Okay. And is there surveillance? We've had prior testimony that there's a surveillance system in Nails 2.
There is.
Did you view any surveillance video at that time?
I did. I had to return because he wasn't familiar with the system. He had to contact somebody to get into it with a PIN number. So I went back days later and was able to view it with him.
Okay. And did you do anything to memorialize that video?
I did. I took some stills of it.
I'll show you Stacy Exhibit 215.
Okay.
Can you tell us what that is?
Yes, it is a photograph documenting the time that Miss Stanley is leaving the business following the appointment.
And that's a photograph that you took?
It is.
It's a fair and accurate representation of the surveillance monitor as you saw it?
It is, yes.
Show Defense Counsel States Exhibit 352, 353, 354, and 355, and 356. Lieutenant, I'll show you what we marked as States Exhibit 352. Tell us what it is.
Yes. State's Exhibit 352 is a search warrant that I have prepared for the residents at Covert Court. This includes the affidavit, the actual search warrant, and the return and receipt.
And what day did you draft that search warrant?
Would have been on the 16th of September, 2016.
Okay, and what was your purpose in seeking a search warrant for that residence?
Information in the investigation. Through the course of the investigation, it was learned that the victim, Stacy Stanley Hicks, had deployed a pepper spray and sprayed it at the assailant. And this was learned afterwards. While examining scene photographs, a pink canister of Mace defense spray was found next to her body. That was not initially collected, so I filled out a search warrant in order to go back to get that and a couple of other items that were relayed to me by Detective Major.
And the who went with you to execute that search warrant?
Special Agent Larry Hootman from Ohio BCI. He went into the home with me, and Detective Major showed up, and she actually wrote on some of the receipts. She was outside the residence waiting for me to bring the stuff out.
Okay. And States Exhibit 352, did you cause that affidavit then to be reviewed and the warrant signed by a competent judicial authority?
I did.
Who was that?
Attorney Tom Budd. He was the acting municipal court judge that day.
Okay. And is States Exhibit 352 a fair and accurate copy of the search warrant affidavit and related materials?
It is.
And when you arrived at Covert Court to execute that search warrant, was the house secured in any way?
It was.
How so?
It was bolted, it closed with the hardware that was installed, screws, et cetera, to keep it secure that way. And we also had tape across it that was initialed when it was sealed up on the first night, that had not been tampered with yet.
Okay, and upon inspection, everything appeared secure?
It did.
And are you confident that the scene had not been tampered with in any way?
Yes, I am.
I'll show you State's Exhibit 15. Tell us what that is.
Yes, this is a evidence bag that contains a pig can of Mace brand spray, and it was found at the basement of 363 Covert Court here in the city of Ashland. And it was prepared by me.
And State's Exhibit 355 is what?
355 is a return and receipt that I completed that day. Again, Detective Major had filled out a couple of the items on here, but it shows that what was seized was a can of Mace spray. Item number 2 was multiple VHS tapes. We counted up to be 51, one DVD, and then we also collected an additional 10 VHS tapes from the basement. That was item 3.
And that item bears your signature?
It does.
And what is your signature?
It indicates that I received the items.
And is State's Exhibit 355 a true and accurate copy of this search warrant return?
It is.
State's Exhibit 356, what is that?
This 356 is a copy of an Ashland Police Division evidence log that I filled out, and it details items of evidence that I had collected throughout this investigation.
And does it include item State's Exhibit 15, the can of Mace?
It does. It shows it as item 4 on the sheet.
Okay, and your it demonstrates your handling of that particular item of evidence?
It does.
And what did you do with that particular item?
After seizing it at the scene, I secured it in the Sallyport evidence cage on the 16th, the same day of September 2016, at 3:30 in the afternoon.
And is 356 a true and accurate copy of the Ashland Police Department evidence log relating to State's Exhibit 15?
It is.
State's Exhibit 353.
Okay.
Your Honor, may we publish State's Exhibit 353?
Any objection?
No, Judge.
What is State's Exhibit 353?
States 353 is a photograph of the rear entrance to the residence on Covert Court 363, I believe.
Okay. And when you say it was secured by hardware, can we see the, I guess, means used to secure the residence in this photograph?
You can. If you look to the right, there is a plywood board that had been affixed there to board it up.
And it was affixed when you arrived to execute your warrant?
Yes, staff from the Pump House Ministries had equipment to get that off of there for me, and they resecured it while I was still there when I was done.
Okay, and you observed them resecure it when you were done?
I did.
State's Exhibit 354. May we publish 354?
Any objection?
No objection. Judge.
Thank you. You may.
And what is State's Exhibit 354?
354 is a photograph of the same door depicted in the previous photograph. It is a close-up of where I affixed tape, and I initialed on that tape on the 16th of September of 2016 at 2:27 p.m.
And is that when you were done executing your search warrant?
It was.
And then the door was covered back up with the... All right.
Correct.
Are both those exhibits, 353 and 354, are they fair and accurate depictions of the scene as you observed it on September 16th,
They are.
2016?
Yes, they are.
On September 13th, or soon thereafter, did you meet with members of the Stanley family? Reference the identification of Stacy Hicks?
I did. I believe it was late, still on the 13th. But yes, I did.
Did you prepare a photograph for presentation to family members?
I did.
Show you State's Exhibit 210. Can you identify that?
I can. This is a photograph that I presented to members of the family. This photograph depicts a tattoo from the left arm of who is identified as Stacy Stanley Hicks. I want to present this to the family for positive identification.
If we may publish this photo, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
Thank
I think
you.
it was published earlier.
It was.
Now, did you have to alter this? Did you alter this photo in any way prior to, or an original photo?
I did.
Some way?
The upper right corner of that photograph, actually what's being depicted here, it would be the lower right corner. It showed some decaying flesh. I didn't feel I felt that would be unsettling to the family, so I sliced that off of there.
So that they wouldn't have to view that?
Correct.
And in your presence, you showed this photograph to them?
I did.
And were they able to identify it?
Yes, they were.
Who did they identify this individual
As Stacy Stanley Hicks.
And is State's Exhibit 210 a fair and accurate depiction of the photo that you showed the family for purposes of identifying the body of Stacy Hicks?
It is.
Lieutenant, prior to the, or at some point at the beginning of this trial, did you have occasion to bring items of evidence from the Ashland Police Department to the Ashland County Court of Common Pleas?
I did.
And what did you do with the items of evidence that you brought from the Ashland Police Department?
I relinquished them to Bailiff Shipper.
Okay. And that would be all items of physical evidence?
All items of physical evidence from my agency. I know that Lieutenant Smart from the Sheriff's Department had an item, and I believe the title would be Ranger Bittinger from Charles Mill from Muskingum Watershed. He also had some items.
And as you brought those items to court, they were all unaltered, and you brought them directly from the Ashland Police Department?
I did.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Nothing further.
Cross-examine, Mr. Whitney.
No, thank you, Judge, no question.
Okay, thank you. You're excused, Lieutenant.
Officer Lee Egerman.
If anybody needs to stand up and stretch, you're welcome to do so. We'll be taking a break after this witness.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter?
Could you tell us your name, please?
Officer Lee Egerman,
And how are you employed?
the Ashland Police Division.
And how long have you been with the police division?
6.5 years.
And what do you do for the police division?
I'm on road patrol.
And what sorts of things does road patrol?
Respond to calls for service, traffic, and law enforcement.
And were you working on September 13th, 2016?
I was.
And did you have occasion to travel to UH Samaritan Hospital?
I did.
For what purpose?
To pick up evidence.
And what was that evidence?
It was a rape kit.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 257. Can you identify that item?
Yes, this is the rape kit that I picked up
And how do you know that's the rape kit you picked up?
from my signature here on the chain of custody portion.
Okay, show you State's Exhibit 274. What is 274?
This is the Ashland Police Department evidence log
For what item?
for the rape kit.
Okay, and what does it demonstrate?
That I picked up the rape kit from the hospital and transported to an evidence locker.
And who did you get it from at the hospital?
Lisa O'Reilly
And what time did you receive that?
at 23:49, so 11:49 p.m.
And does State's Exhibit 274 appear to be a true and accurate copy of the Ashland Police Department evidence log?
Yes, it is.
And is State's Exhibit 257 in substantially similar condition as to when you received it on September 13, 2016?
Yes, it is.
And you placed that particular item of evidence where?
In an evidence locker at the police department.
And that's a secure location?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, officer.
Thank you.
Nothing further.
Cross?
No question, Judge, thank you.
Okay, thank you, officer. You're excused.
Thank you.
Now 10:21 on the courtroom clock. We're going to take a morning recess at this time. Again, ladies and gentlemen, don't discuss this case among yourselves. Don't let anybody discuss with you. Don't draw any conclusions or form any opinions. Comply with the court's prior order of admonitions. Thank you. Court's in recess.
deference to my elders.
I do.
He is, yeah. If you want. Thank you. We'll call Tim Schreffer, Your Honor.
Sir, you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Just tell us your name, please.
Lieutenant Tim Schreffler, Schreffler.
And how are you employed?
The City of Ashland Police Department.
And how long have you been with the police department?
35 years.
Oof. And what do you do currently for the police department?
I'm the night shift watch commander.
And what does that mean?
I'm in charge of the 2 squads that work night shift.
And what hours is night watch?
Normally 4 p.m. to 2 a.m.
And How long have you been into that shift?
It's October of this year.
And what was your prior shift?
Day shift, 6 a.m. to 2 or 4 p.m.
Were you working day shift on September 13th of 2016?
I was.
And prior to September 13th, did you play a role in the investigation of a missing person by the name of Elizabeth Griffith?
I did.
And what did you do reference that investigation?
I assisted Captain Lay. I wrote a search warrant for Elizabeth's apartment at Village Green.
Show counsel, States Exhibit 357. Do you recognize that document?
Yes, this is a copy of the warrant that I wrote.
Okay. And what was the area you were proposing to search?
The apartment in the 242 Matthews Avenue, apartment L.
Okay. And it was your understanding that was whose apartment?
Elizabeth Griffith.
And did you have that affidavit reviewed and the search warrant signed by a competent judicial authority?
I did.
Who would that be?
Judge Versillo down in juvenile court.
Okay. And is States Exhibit 357 a true and accurate copy of the search warrant and related affidavit and return prepared by you?
Yes, I did the warrant and Captain Lay actually did the return.
And did you accompany Captain Lay to that location?
I did.
And what were your impressions?
The house was clean. There was, I didn't really do too much of the searching. I did one of the bedrooms and he did the kitchen and the living room area.
And then Captain Lay took custody and control of any evidence collected?
Yes.
Did there come a time when you were made aware that there was another missing person in the city of Ashland?
Yes.
And who would that be?
Stacy Stanley.
Approximately when did you become aware of this missing person?
It was the weekend before the 13th. I can't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday. I was in there on overtime and her family had come in and wanted to speak to someone about her being missing.
Okay, and who did they speak to?
They spoke to me.
And I guess what was the general topic of conversation?
They just told us that, or told me that she was missing and that she was last seen at the BP station in Ashland.
Okay, and did you communicate this to your fellow officers in the shift?
I did. Initially, while I was talking to them, someone got a hold of the dispatcher and said that they thought her vehicle had been located on East 9th Street.
And did you travel to that location?
I did.
And were you able to verify if that was the case?
Yes.
Was it?
Yes, it was her car.
Okay. And at some point, were you relieved that day by the oncoming shift, next shift?
Yes, Sergeant Baker was the night shift.
Okay, and did you relate the details of this missing persons incident to Sergeant Baker?
I did.
And you told us you were working on the morning of September 13th?
Yes.
What happened the morning of September 13th?
It was Sergeant Cox, Officer Dorsey, and I. We got a 911, the dispatcher had a 911 call of a woman that had been abducted and was being held in a house by the 4th Street Laundry.
So what'd you do?
We all responded there. Officer Dorsey and I parked on it would be the west side of the building.
Okay, and what'd you proceed to do?
There was some confusion on which house, because the houses are almost identical, so we began going house to house while they had her on the phone. And then at one point, the the dispatcher said that she could hear the door being rattled. That was Officer Dorsey at the house she was actually found in. So we went over there.
Okay. And what happened then?
I was standing at the door came open, there was a naked woman standing there at the screen door. We called her out, put her in the yard between the two houses. I asked where the defendant was, and she told us what room he was at. All three of us made entry and took him into custody.
And once the defendant was in custody, what did you do?
I walked out with them. Well, after they had taken him into custody, I went and looked for the woman. She was hiding in the bathroom. She'd come back in the house. I walked out with them, and then after they were in the car, I went back into the house. She had gotten herself dressed. She was in the bathroom. I asked her if she needed to be looked at by the medics. She declined, and then I put her in my car.
How did she look?
Looked scared. I just saw her briefly in the house, and then when we were in the car, I talked with her.
Okay. And what was her demeanor like?
She was very scared. At one point, I had to leave to call Captain Lay to let him know what I had, and she was very upset about me leaving her.
And when you first made contact with the defendant, what did he look like?
He was naked in the bed. I saw him for maybe a minute.
And did you re-enter the house after the victim was in your car and the defendant was placed in custody?
I did.
For what purpose?
We wanted to clear the rest of the house, look for anybody else that would be in there.
Okay. And was anybody else in there?
No, nobody alive. Yeah. We cleared the basement first, and then we went up to the second floor.
Okay. And was the basement secured in some manner?
Yes, there was a slide bolt. The handle had been broken off. I got a screwdriver out of the living room. I replaced that knob that was broken and was able to open the door.
And what was your impression of the basement area of the house?
As soon as the door opened, there was a very foul smell and lots of flies.
And you went upstairs?
Yes.
And was the upstairs secured in some way?
Yes, it was.
How so?
The door was locked somehow. I'm not sure how. I got an entry tool out of the car that was like a pry bar on one end and a little sledgehammer on the other. And I used that to breach the door to get upstairs.
And what was your impression of the upstairs?
It was, there was nothing really. There was a bed that had restraints on it, and there was a bathroom at the top that the crack at the bottom of the door was covered with like towels and clothing, the crack between the door and the floor.
The one in the bathroom?
Yes.
Did you notice in the room with the bed that had the restraints tied on it, was there a closet in that room?
I didn't know that until later when I went back in with BCI. When we initially cleared it, it was still dark outside, and all that stuff was piled there. I didn't know there was a door there.
So you couldn't even tell there was a door there?
No.
And then at some point, you said you called Captain Lay and briefed him on the situation?
I did, yes.
And did you transport Lori's Philic on station?
I did.
Now, as part of your duties with the Ashland Police Department, you also do you also have responsibilities relating to the evidence?
I do.
What are those responsibilities?
I'm an evidence custodian, so I'll take stuff that officers submit and then I'll move it into the evidence room.
Okay, and at some point in time, I guess, did the evidence in the evidence room relating to this matter need to be redistributed?
It did.
Would you explain that?
Most of the stuff was in the Sally Port cage, so I entered it and just put the stickers on it, the evidence stickers.
And what is the Sally Port cage?
It's just a fenced-in area in the Sally Port at the police station.
And was the evidence already located within the port?
Yes, when it was originally brought in, most of it went in there, and I never even really moved it. I just entered it and then put the labels on the stuff.
And then did you have
Yes,
within evidence logs?
yes.
Show you State's Exhibit 120. Identify that.
It's copies of our evidence sheets from this case.
Okay. And does State's Exhibit 120 document your handling of evidence in this matter?
It does. My initials are on the bottom, the Lieutenant TBS.
Okay. And what, relating to the evidence that's listed in State's Exhibit 120, what'd you do relative to those?
At this point, I put the stuff from evidence into the Sally Port cage, and then at one point, I believe I got some car keys out so BCI could process the car, and then I put the keys back. And basically, that's all I did with these items.
Okay, so the items contained in there, with the exception of the Mitsubishi car keys, never left Sally Port?
Correct.
The car,
Yes.
I'll show you State's Exhibit 155.
Okay.
Can you identify that document?
Yes, it's got the BCI label on it, and this is our police department label that I generated, and it's item number 46. And if you go to the sheets, item number 46 is listed as a paper bag containing a set of Mitsubishi car keys.
And are those car keys that we have marked as State's Exhibit 155, they appear to be in substantially similar condition as to when you took custody control?
Yes.
Now she's Exhibit 202. What is that?
It's listed as item 84, a thumb drive with some kind of scans. I can't make out the writing.
Okay, and does that form document your handling of that piece of evidence?
Yes, I took it out of the locker A6, and then I immediately put it in the Sally Port cage with the rest of the items of evidence.
And what is locker A6?
It's a small wall locker in the hallway at the police station.
Is that an area where patrol officers and non-evidence related officers can put an item of evidence?
Yes, they submit it in the locker, and there's a secured box that they can drop the key in that's only accessible by evidence officers.
I'll show you State's Exhibit 8.
Okay. And this matches item 84, item 84 on the sheet.
Okay, and that would be the item you took out from locker A6 and put in Sally Port?
Yes.
Does it appear to be in substantially similar condition as to when it was in custody and control?
Yes.
Show you Exhibit 321. Tell us what 321 is.
It's also a copy of a police department evidence sheet filled out by Detective Major.
Okay. Did demonstrate your handling of any evidence in this case?
Yes.
What is that?
I took the items out of locker number 4. There's 5 items listed on this sheet, and I put them in the Sally Port cage with the rest of the items.
And locker 4, is that similar in nature to locker 6?
Yes, it's just bigger. It's kind of like a bus station locker.
How many lockers are there?
There's 6 of the bus station ones, and I think 12 of the smaller ones. We have a big wall locker for big items.
Show you State's 301.
Okay. And this is item 1 on this sheet, and it's item number 1 on the label.
Okay, and is that one of the items you took from locker 4 and put in the Sally Port cage?
Yes.
And does it appear to be in substantially similar condition as to when it was in your custody?
Yeah, yes.
Show you State's Exhibit 273.
Yes.
What do those 2 pages include?
These are items that Captain Lay took out of, I believe, Elizabeth Griffith's apartment.
Okay, and does page 2 of that evidence log indicate your handling of any evidence that's been?
Yes.
What would that be?
I took the items out of locker number 1, which is one of the bus station type lockers, and moved that into the Sally Port cage with the rest of the items.
First, State's Exhibit 268.
Okay. That's item number 1 on this sheet.
Okay, and 270.
This is item number 5, which would be on the second page. Yes.
Exhibit 271.
This is item number 9, which is also on the second sheet.
And all 3 of those items would have been removed from the evidence locker and put into the Sally Port cage by yourself?
Yes.
And do they all appear to be in substantially similar conditions to when they were in custody of the children?
They do.
Show you State's Exhibit 74.
Yes.
And what is that?
It's a copy of the police department evidence sheet filled out by Officer Eggman.
And does the form demonstrate your handling of evidence?
Yes.
I'll show you State's Exhibit 257.
Yes.
By that,
Yes, it's on the sticker on the back from the police department. It's item number 7, which is listed on the sheet.
okay, and did you handle that particular item?
I did. Officer Eggman had put it in a refrigerator at the police station, and I took it out of there and I moved it to the Sally Port cage.
And then was there a time when you re-received this particular item?
I don't believe so. I think it was back in the locker by then Sergeant after it came back from BCS.
And does State's Exhibit 257 appear to be in substantially similar conditions to when you removed from the refrigerator and put it in the Sally Port?
Yes.
State's Exhibit 201.
This is a copy of a police department evidence sheet filled out by Officer Newman.
Does it demonstrate your handling of items of evidence in this case?
Yes.
Show you State's Exhibit 200.
It's got the police department evidence sticker that lists item number 1 corresponding to this sheet.
Okay, and did you handle that particular item at some point?
I did. I took it out of locker A5 and put it in the Sally Port cage with the rest of the items.
And does it appear to be in substantially similar condition to when it was in your custody and control?
Yes. Again, it's a copy of a police department evidence sheet filled out again by Officer Newman.
And State's Exhibit 198.
Yes, it's the item number 2 sticker, and it matches item number 2 on the sheet.
Okay, and did you handle that particular item of evidence at some point?
I did. I took it out of locker A6 and put it in the sally port cage.
Does it appear to be in substantially similar conditions to when it was in your custody?
Yes.
Exhibit 197. Identify that document.
It's a copy of an evidence sheet filled out by Detective Evans.
Show you State's Exhibit 191.
Item 82 on the sticker, and it matches item 82 on the sheet.
And State's Exhibit 196.
Item 83 on the sticker, and it's listed as item 83 on the sheet.
And at some point were those two items handled by yourself?
Yes, I took them out of locker number 2 and put them in the sally port cage.
They appear to be in substantially similar conditions when they were in your custody.
They do.
And State's Exhibit 276.
The top sheet is a police department sheet, and the next 2 pages are evidence log generated by BCI.
And does that demonstrate your handling of any items of evidence?
Yes.
Show you State's Exhibit 388.
The sticker lists it as item number 20, and it matches item number, there's also a BCI sticker that lists it as item number 13, and it's listed as 13 on the 3rd page.
Third page. And then that's incorporated into the police department evidence log from the
Yes.
BCI?
Yes, it's our item number 20.
Okay, and what did you do with this particular item of evidence?
I took them out of locker number 4 and put them in the sally port cage.
And does it appear to be in substantially similar condition as to when you took custody and control it?
It does.
The evidence logs that you've looked at thus far in your testimony, they all appear to be true and accurate copies of the evidence logs used in the regular course of business with the Ashland Police Department?
Yes.
Now, Lieutenant, do you go through the evidence lockers at the beginning of your shift or at the end, or?
It just depends on when I have free time.
You just go over the evidence lockers and see what's in there?
If there's lockers that have items in them, I try to empty them so that they're space available in case they would take more evidence.
Okay. And how long have you been, I guess, removing the items from the evidence lockers and placing them elsewhere?
It's probably been 20 years.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Lieutenant. Nothing further.
Ross? No questions, Judge, thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
I do.
Sir, can you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, my name is Dr. Todd Barr, B as in boy, A-R-R.
Dr. Barr, what do you do for a living?
I am currently employed with the Summit County Medical Examiner's Office as a deputy medical examiner.
What does a deputy medical examiner do?
Medical examiners, we investigate medical legal death cases, cases that involve violent deaths, including homicides, suicides, accidents, unwitnessed natural deaths, unattended deaths, deaths in police custody, and any kind of suspicious deaths.
And how long have you been a deputy examiner?
I began my training in July of 2016, and I finished my fellowship in June of 2017, and I've been a deputy medical examiner at Summit County since.
Before working at Summit County, you did a fellowship, you said?
Yes.
Where was that at?
That was at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office.
So in September of 2016, were you employed at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And are you a board-certified physician?
Yes, I am.
Do you have to receive any kind of education or training to be a deputy medical examiner?
Yes.
Okay. Showing defense counsel, Stacy Exhibit 358. Dr. Barr, I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes at Stacy Exhibit 358. Do you recognize what that document is?
Yes, I do.
What is that, please?
This is a copy of my curriculum vitae, which is 7 pages long.
Is that a true and accurate copy of your CV?
Yes, it is.
And does that document your education background and some of the training that you received for your position?
Yes, it does.
Is that the sort of thing that you keep in the ordinary course of business as a deputy medical examiner?
Yes, we do, and we keep it updated on a
Okay.
regular basis.
So tell us about your educational background.
Sure. I completed my bachelor's degree in science at the University of New Hampshire in Durham, New Hampshire. I then went on to complete my medical degree training at Dartmouth Medical School, which is now known as the Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth in Hanover, New Hampshire. Subsequent to that, I did residency training in psychiatry at Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center in Lebanon, New Hampshire. Following that, I went into pathology. I did a residency in anatomic and clinical pathology at Allegheny General Hospital in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Then did a surgical pathology fellowship, which is subspecialty training, for 1 year at Allegheny General Hospital. Had a short period of employment with a professional laboratory, and then did my forensic fellowship training, which is pathology subspecialty training at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office in Cleveland.
Dr. Barr, what is pathology?
Pathology is the study of illness and disease in the human body.
Okay. And are you board certified?
I am board certified in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology.
What are the differences between those three things?
Anatomic pathology is the disease process that you would find, say, in a surgical specimen at a hospital when someone has an operation and they take a piece of tissue out. We look at the tissue under microscopes to make diagnoses.
Okay.
Clinical pathology is the study of pathology that involves bodily fluids, anything other than tissue samples involving blood, fluids, that type of thing. Chemistries, toxicology, that type of thing.
Okay. And I think forensic pathology was the last one?
Forensic pathology is a subspecialty of anatomic pathology, which is the study of forensic medicine in the application of investigating medical legal death investigations.
And you're board certified in those three areas?
Yes, I am.
And are you current in those certifications?
Yes, I am.
Okay. What kind of training, in addition to what you've described, have you received any other training to qualify for your position as a deputy medical examiner?
We do additional ongoing training as any professional would. We attend conferences, write articles, do presentations, educate the public, that type of thing. Ongoing medical education activities.
Okay, so it didn't just stop at your certification, you continue to learn and grow in your profession.
That's right. It's a requirement of board certification.
Okay. So Dr. Barr, you told us that you were employed at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office in September of 2016. Did you have the occasion to perform an autopsy on two individuals, Elizabeth Griffith and Stacy Hicks, aka Stacy Stanley?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Dr. Barr, could you tell us generally, how is an autopsy performed from when a decedent's body is brought to the medical examiner's office and then continuing from there?
Generally speaking, when a decedent arrives at our facility, we will log that individual in, document the transfer, the chain of custody, photograph the decedent inside the body bag they received in, and then progressively reveal what's inside the bag and photograph as we go. And then it's determined based on what type of case is presenting before us, whether we will continue with a full, complete autopsy, which includes an external and an internal examination, or conduct a partial autopsy, which would be a focused examination on a certain part of the body, or simply an external examination where we review the entire surfaces of the external part of the body to ensure that there are no trauma-related injuries.
So Dr. Barr, is that at that initial point when the body is photographed as it's received, is it at that point that you make that determination what route to take on your autopsy?
Yes.
What sorts of factors lead in one direction or the other?
We take into account scene investigation, particularly in homicide cases. A pathologist, a forensic pathologist at Cuyahoga County will go out to the scene. If it's not involving a potential homicide case, we have medical legal death investigators that do attend and go out to the death investigation scene, collect evidence at the scene, photograph the scene, document everything at the scene, and bring that back to us, create a report, an investigation report that we review, as part of our review process to see what type of case we're dealing with, as well as any police reports or discussions with detectives that may be part of an ongoing investigation.
For the first part of that, is that for cases that occur in Cuyahoga County?
Yes.
Okay. Is it fair to say that the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office provides services in doing autopsies for surrounding counties?
Absolutely. The county is contracted with, I believe it's 11 surrounding counties that don't have forensic pathologists to do their autopsies, so we are subcontracted to do their work.
Okay. So, but I guess the point to what you were saying right there is that some outside information about the investigation can help you to determine what route to take on your autopsy. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. After then documenting the decedent as she has arrived and then determining what route to take, if it's a full autopsy, what kind of steps do you take next?
So if it's a complicated homicide case, we would document all of the clothing that the decedent is wearing. We would photograph and collect any evidence that may be attached to the outside of the clothing or in the vicinity of the body. If we need to collect the clothing as evidence, then we would photograph each piece of article of clothing that is removed and have it documented sequentially how that's removed. And then we would continue with the external examination of the body. We would photograph and document any type of injuries or patterns or anything that we would see on the body before proceeding to opening the body through the Y incision.
Dr. Barr, is it fair to say when you're looking for these injuries, you're looking for potential causes of death or other injuries suffered by a decedent? Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what would happen next then in this process?
So once we've documented externally everything that's happened to the decedent, and we would proceed then with an internal examination where we would open the body and we would examine each organ system systematically, one by one, to see if there's any natural causes of death or any catastrophic natural illness that could account for the decedent's death. If we haven't found any trauma or injury-related causes. And we would then document all of the internal organs, the brain, the weights, size, and any findings that we would find that would be pertinent.
So Dr. Barr, when you're doing the external examination, if you don't see things like stab wounds or bullet wounds or obvious things that would have or could have caused someone's death, that's when you are looking at natural causes of death and other potential causes inside the body to rule those out as either a cause or not a cause of death.
Sure.
Okay. And through this process then, as you are making this determination, do you document your findings?
Absolutely.
Do you write a report as to your findings?
Yes.
And are those reports kept in the ordinary course of business when we're talking specifically about this case at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Dr. Barr, for Elizabeth Griffith, I want to talk to you about the autopsy you performed on her. Before we get into the particulars, do you ever, in your job as a deputy medical examiner, rely on things like dental records as part of your job?
Yes.
For what purpose?
For identification purposes.
Under what sort of circumstances would that either be relevant or necessary to rely on dental records to identify a decedent?
So typically, we would identify the decedent either by next of kin, by some sort of visual aid, by fingerprints, dental records, x-ray records, that type of thing. And typically in cases that come into Cuyahoga from another county, that county usually presents that individual already identified. In this particular case, they were not identified, and we did use dental records of Elizabeth Griffith to compare ante-mortem and post-mortem dental x-rays to ensure identity.
So ante-mortem means before death, is that right?
That's correct.
And post-mortem means after death?
That's correct.
So were, in this case, x-rays taken of the person who came to be identified as Elizabeth Griffith?
Yes, they were.
And did you compare those postmortem after death dental x-rays with records from before death?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Now, Dr. Barr, the dental records that you compared, were those provided to you?
Yes.
The ante-mortem, the pre-death records?
Yes.
Okay. You didn't have to go to a dentist's office and get those records yourself?
They were requested.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been previously identified. This is Stacy Exhibit 351. This was identified earlier today as Elizabeth Griffith's dental records, x-rays specifically of her mouth, her teeth, and her jaw. Would these have been the records that you used to compare to the x-rays that were taken later after Elizabeth Griffith's death?
Yes, State's Exhibit 351 represents the antemortem dental x-rays that were used for comparison.
Okay. So, Dr. Barr, you did this comparison of x-rays, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
What did you determine?
I determined that when you do examinations where you are comparing dental x-rays, you need to find a minimum of 3 comparable points that you can, with a reasonable degree of medical certainty, make the determination that these are from the same people. And that was done in this case. There were at least 3 points that were identical.
And so based on that, Dr. Barr, who did you identify, the person that we have come to describe as Elizabeth Griffith, who did you identify her as?
I identified her as Elizabeth Griffith.
Thank you. So, Dr. Barr, could you take us through, please, your autopsy examination of Elizabeth Griffith?
So the examination of Elizabeth Griffith, she arrived in our facility in an advanced state of decomposition, which was partially the reason why we needed to do dental x-rays. We weren't able to get good fingerprints from her. And when her body arrived, she was wrapped in various garments that had her restrained with her arms behind her back and her legs behind her back. She was in a state of decomposition where the discoloration was severe on her skin. She had moderate insect activity, including fly, larvae, eggs, maggots, that type of thing. And she had been in a state of desiccation, which is drying out, and the skin becomes kind of leathery, yellow-brown and leathery, and the fingertips become dried out to the point where you can't get a fingerprint from them. Sometimes there's degloving, which means the surface of the skin comes off. And in addition, when insect activity begins, they usually start in areas that are moist, like the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears, the genital area, and those areas become obscured due to the activity.
So, Dr. Barr, are these observations that you've just described to us the observations you made when Elizabeth Griffith's body was, you first observed her at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's office?
Yes.
Now, I'd ask you if, for any autopsy you do, if you do a report, and you indicated you do, that you
Yes.
do, right? Did you do a report in this case for Elizabeth Griffith's autopsy?
Yes, I did.
Show defense counsel State's Exhibit 359, as well as 360, 361, 362, 363, 364, all of which are photos. marked for identification purposes as Stacy Exhibit 359. Do you recognize that document?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
State's Exhibit 359 is a copy of my report of autopsy, which consists of the front page with the anatomic diagnoses and cause of death, and then the next 3 pages are detailed, systematic description of what was found on the internal examination, and the final 3 pages are the toxicology report that was issued by Dr. Schuler in this particular case.
Now, concerning those last 3 pages, Dr. Barr, the toxicology report, you had indicated, I think earlier, that when an autopsy is being done, this kind of information is important. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why is that? Why is the toxicology report important to your findings as a deputy medical examiner?
Toxicology reports are important because they will tell us if there's some sort of drug in the person's system, what kind of influence they might be under, whether it's alcohol or drugs, that type of thing, any illicit drugs or medications.
And is that something that you rely on, the toxicology report, for any autopsy as part of the process in making your ultimate determination as to the cause of death?
Yes, it helps rule out other possibilities of death.
Now, the document as a whole, as you've described it, is that a fair and accurate copy of your autopsy report for Elizabeth Griffith?
Yes, it is.
And is that kept in the ordinary course of business at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So, Dr. Barr, you've described to us Elizabeth Griffith's appearance when you first observed the body. Can you tell us in a little bit more detail, or I guess maybe make clear, was she clothed?
She was not clothed, although she had clothing attached to her extremities.
And can you describe how that clothing was attached?
She had, her hands were secured behind her back with a red and white striped shirt. Then she also had a piece of black fabric that was wrapped around her right ankle that extended up under this red and white striped shirt, up around her neck and back down, securing her right leg up behind her back. And then an additional piece of black fabric was around the left ankle, which when we received the body was not attached to anything at the time, but her left leg was behind her back as well.
So her hands were tied behind her back?
Yes.
And there's a piece of fabric attached to her right ankle that continued up underneath the hand bindings and attached to her neck.
It wrapped around her neck.
Wrapped
yes.
around her neck, thank
yes.
you. And then there was an additional binding on the ankle that wasn't, when you got control of the body, wasn't connected to anything.
Correct.
Okay. Dr. Brown, handing you has been identified as State's Exhibit 360. Do you recognize what State's Exhibit 360 is?
Yes, I do.
What is that, please?
State's Exhibit 360 is a photograph of Elizabeth Griffith as she appeared to us with her unique identifying case number, OU-16-245. And this is the state in which she presented to us. However, with the caveat that this is after we've done trace evidence collection and the articles of clothing have been removed, and she is now no longer face down, she's lying on her back.
And that's part of that process you've previously described to us. After a decedent is photographed as they come, then things are removed from the body and you photograph and examine the body again.
Correct.
Okay. Is that exhibit, Stacy Exhibit 360, is that right?
Yes.
Is that a fair and accurate representation of the decedent, Elizabeth Griffith, whose autopsy you performed and are describing to us today?
Yes.
And when was that autopsy performed?
The autopsy was performed on September 14th, 2016.
Okay. Judge, can you approach?
Hey.
I want to make sure my bailiffs are up to speed here. Okay. Attorney McNamara, you can continue whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Judge. Dr. Barr, I'm handing you this unidentified State's Exhibit 361. You recognize what that is?
Yes, I do.
What is that, please?
State's Exhibit 361 is a photograph of Elizabeth Griffith's body as she appeared to us. This was after she had been moved from a prone position, which is face down, to a rolled up onto her left side, showing the pieces of fabric that had her extremities bound behind her back.
Doctor, is State's Exhibit 361 a fair and accurate representation of that view of Elizabeth Griffith's body as she was presented at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes, it is.
Judge, with the court's permission, we'd like to publish State's Exhibit 361.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
You may.
So, Dr. Barr, you had previously indicated that the wrists were bound together with a piece of fabric. Do we see that in this photograph?
Yes, I do.
Okay. That red and white striped shirt, is that correct?
Yes.
In this particular view in Stacey Exhibit 361, can we see Miss Griffith's left arm or left ankle or wrist?
No.
Okay. But the one we can't see, the right one, appears to be bound by that piece of fabric. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And does this also document what you had testified to previously, the piece of clothing that bound the right ankle to the neck?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And you State's Exhibit 363. So 361, I think I asked you, that's a fair and accurate representation of Ms. Griffith.
Yes.
I'll hand you 362 instead. What is 362 a photograph of?
State's Exhibit 362 is a photograph of Elizabeth Griffith's body as presented to the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office with these ligatures still in place, and she is now photographed on her right side, depicting the posterior or her back area with the fabric as previously described in place.
Is that a fair and accurate representation of that with Ms. Griffith from that date?
Yes.
Judge, of course, permission to publish this photo, State's Exhibit 362.
Any objection?
No objection.
Photo will be published.
Dr. Barr, in this photo, State's Exhibit 362, can we see Elizabeth Griffith's left ankle?
Yes.
Okay. And is that the one that was bound, but the looks like the pants weren't connected to anything else when you got the body?
Yes. It was a pair of black pants that were tied. One leg of the pants were tied around the left ankle, and the end of the other leg of the pants were tucked under the red and white striped shirt, but they weren't attached to anything.
Okay. So like the binding from the right ankle, both of those were underneath the red and white striped shirt that bound Elizabeth's wrists?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Judge. And that's a fair and accurate representation of Ms. Griffith?
Yes, it is.
State's Exhibit 363. Can you identify that photograph?
State's Exhibit 363 is a photograph of Elizabeth Griffith's back as she presented to the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office with these ligatures in place. And in this photograph, at the top of the photograph, you can see her left hand with the red and white striped fabric attached around her wrist, continuing to the bottom of the photograph to her right hand with that black piece of pant fabric tucked underneath the red and white fabric.
Okay, is that a fair and accurate representation of that view of Elizabeth Griffith from the day you performed the autopsy?
Yes, it is.
Judge, may we publish that photograph?
Any objection?
No objection.
Photo will be published.
So Dr. Barr, what we see here that's new, we can see the left wrist now and see that the left wrist and the right wrist are bound together with that shirt as you've previously described. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Judge. So, Dr. Barr, you did your preliminary examination of the body. Is it fair to say we're only looking at a very small number of photographs, but many, many photographs were taken to document Miss Griffith and her condition as she came to the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes, I don't know exactly how many photographs, but she was documented with trace evidence photographs and with autopsy photographs, and it numbered over 100 at least.
Okay. And the photos that we saw, that we have seen published, those were before the actual autopsy was conducted, is that correct?
That's correct.
That was part of that initial examination you've already described?
The external examination.
After completing, well, was there anything of note, Dr. Barr, to you when you did the external examination? And specifically notable in trying to determine a cause of death in this case?
With the condition of the body and the way she presented with these pieces of fabric wrapped around, it clearly high on the list is an asphyxial death. Now, whether that's by soft ligature or other mechanisms, that's yet to be determined through the internal examination.
Did you observe any stab wounds or bullet wounds or punctures of any kind?
There were no external injuries whatsoever, including stab wounds, bullet wounds, that type of thing. Bruising is a difficult thing to assess with a decomposing body because of the discoloration, so that would be difficult to assess.
Was it based on that you don't have these other obvious indicators of physical trauma that you sort of, as you're doing the internal examination, are thinking maybe an asphyxiation death?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about having a little bit of outside information and that can help to know what to look for. The fact that the body of Elizabeth Griffith came to you when you did this autopsy and was bound in the way that you've described and that we've seen in the state's exhibits that you explained, is that relevant to you in your examination?
Yes.
Why?
Clearly, based on my education, this presents as some type of foul play. Clearly, this isn't a natural death. A person doesn't die in this state naturally.
Okay. So, anything else of note on the body itself before you performed a more in-depth examination of the internal part of Elizabeth Griffith?
When we took the ligatures off, or the pieces of fabric off from the neck and from the ankles and the wrists, there was blanching, which is a whitening of the skin. And basically that just means when the fabric is tied around, if it's tight enough, it can squeeze the underlying blood from the skin below out of the skin, so that as the dying process begins and lividity, which is the pooling of blood, sets in, you would leave behind a white mark that would be indicative of this ligature was there at the time of the death or shortly thereafter.
The blanching that you've described doesn't, and I want to make sure I've got your last answer clear, doesn't indicate that's necessarily how a person died, but that a binding or ligature was on the body around the time of death. Is that correct?
Correct. In this particular case, when you have decomposition, the body begins to bloat in the natural process, and even if a loose ligature is around someone's neck or wrist, as their body swells, that blanching will still occur. So that could be a process of being in place while the body's being decomposing, or it could have been there present during the actual death itself.
Dr. Barr, where on Elizabeth's body did you observe this blanching as you've described it?
It was circumferentially or completely around both of her ankles, both of her wrists, and around her neck.
And Dr. Barr, were those all places where you observed bindings attached to Elizabeth?
Yes.
The hand has been marked for identification purposes as Stacy Exhibit 364. What is that?
State's Exhibit 364 is a photograph of from the left side of Elizabeth's body. Her chin and upper part of her head will be in the top portion of the photograph. The back of her head will be to the right of the photograph. And in the center of the photograph is a blanched area which was underneath the black ligature that went around her neck.
Is that a fair and accurate representation of Elizabeth Griffith after that ligature around her neck was removed during your autopsy?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, publish that photograph.
Any objection?
No objection.
Photograph will be published.
So Dr. Barr, as we look at the screen, it's oriented a little bit differently perhaps than the photograph that I handed you. That center section, I think you described that as Elizabeth's neck, is that correct?
Excuse me, so where the ruler is would be along her left ear and jawline. So in the photograph as it's depicted on the screen, the back of her head would be at the bottom of the photograph, as she would be lying on the table.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Judge. Judge, if you want to.
Sorry,
Thank you.
it didn't take. Here we go.
So, Dr. Barr, after making these observations of Elizabeth's body, that there weren't stab wounds or bullet wounds, and the blanching, as you've already described, was there anything else about the external part of her body that was relevant to your analysis in this case?
Just the degree of decomposition. She also had numerous pieces of debris on the anterior or the front part of her body. Her breasts and abdomen were blanched as well and flattened, which would indicate that she was lying in a face-down position for that time period. And perhaps this debris was on whatever surface she was laid on.
Dr. Barr, has there been an occasion when you've performed an autopsy where you have noted dried fecal matter on a decedent?
Yes.
Did you note in this particular case with Elizabeth Griffith, if you recall, any dried fecal matter on her body?
I did not.
Okay. So after the findings that you've already described to us, Dr. Barr, what did you do next in your autopsy?
So the next portion of the examination would be the internal examination, where we would look internally, systematically, to determine, paying close attention to the neck area because of this blanching. We want to make sure to determine what type of asphyxial death this could be, and there are classic findings in different types of asphyxial deaths.
So how specifically did you perform that internal examination, doctor? And whether, are you also looking for other things that could possibly cause death, to rule them out or not?
Absolutely. I mean, we're still looking for natural causes. This could have been a natural death that somebody tied somebody up and didn't want anyone to know about, or this could be part of the mechanism. So we're also looking for, was there a heart attack? Was there any tumors? Were there any other indications that she had some sort of natural catastrophic event occurring as well? We need to rule that out as well.
And doctor, as you're performing the internal examination, do you do that systematically? Meaning you move from organ to organ and to determine whether or not that could be a factor in the death?
Yes.
Did you do that in this case with Elizabeth Griffith?
Yes, I did.
And in examining her organs, was there anything that would suggest to you a cause of death?
No.
Okay, so you were able to rule out these things you just mentioned, heart attack, kidney failure, other kinds of disease that would have been obvious in the organs?
Exactly.
Okay. So what else did you do as part of this internal examination?
So focusing on the neck area, when we have any type of asphyxial death or possible manual strangulation, that type of thing, we do a very detailed layer by layer dissection of the soft tissues and the muscles of the they're called the strap muscles. They're muscles that hold up the neck in place so you can turn your head in different directions. As well as the bone, the hyoid bone, which forms the bottom of the roof or the floor of the mouth, and then the cartilages of the larynx, the trachea, those type of things. We look for injuries. We look for hemorrhage in the strap muscles. We look for fractures in these bones. And we also do a complete posterior neck to look for any hemorrhage in and around the cervical spine, the base of the head, those types of things.
Doctor, when you're looking for a fracture to the hyoid bone or to the cartilage in this area as you've described it, what could that indicate to you? Why are you looking for that?
So typically, there's a couple of different mechanisms that can cause asphyxiation. There are a couple of different neck holds that can be applied, a crossbar hold, or which is where the arm or an object is straight across the front of the anterior neck. With pressure applied backwards, that would close off the windpipe. So it would prevent any oxygen from getting into the air and thus getting into the blood system. Although it doesn't stop the flow of blood to the brain. It only stops the air flow. And in that particular case, you would be likely to see injury to those cartilages and that hyoid bone. The same way with a manual strangulation, if someone put their hands on someone's neck and pushed in with their thumbs to try to compress the windpipe, you would expect to see injury to the windpipe and potentially the hyoid bone as well.
Did you observe injuries to the hyoid bone or to the cartilage in that area that you've already described in the case of Elizabeth Griffith?
I did not.
And so you didn't have those indicators for the arm bar or the sort of face-to-face thumbs on the windpipe strangulation, is that correct?
That's correct.
There was a third way, though, that you alluded to. What's that?
So another way is called a sleeper hold, it's when someone wraps their arm around an individual's neck where the front portion of the neck would be at the elbow. So the pressure is coming from the upper arm and the forearm at an angle on the sides of the neck with enough force, which is roughly 11 pounds of pressure, you can occlude or shut off the carotid arteries and the jugular veins, thus compressing the blood vessels that supply about 85 to 90% of the blood to the brain. You can stop the flow of blood to the brain so that oxygen is not getting to the brain.
So if the front of someone's neck is kind of in the crook of the elbow, then the forearm and the bicep area are applying pressure to the carotid artery. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And there's no pressure to the windpipe.
And if blood flow is cut off by closing off the carotid artery and the blood flow is cut off to the brain, is that a potential cause of death?
Yes.
Okay. So in this case, you didn't observe the damage to the bone, the hyoid bone, and the cartilage. So based on your training experience, what does that lead you to believe about that particular part of the body when you're doing your examination?
So it led me to believe that she was somehow asphyxiated by having pressure applied to these vessels in her neck. That could be done by this sleeper hold or by a soft ligature that wouldn't leave a mark, but most likely it would be from some sort of compression to the neck.
Now, Dr. Barr, referencing you sometimes get outside information. Have you sometimes received outside information like that a person says this is how the death occurred that is inconsistent with your findings?
Occasionally.
Okay. What do you do with that?
We would explain to them that the evidence is not consistent with what's being described.
So outside information can help to inform your examination, but it's not the be-all, end-all, and if you have a different conclusion, you're going to say that didn't happen the way they said.
Absolutely.
Okay. Dr. Barr, did you have the occasion to watch a video, in this case after your autopsy had been concluded, of the defendant demonstrating how the crimes were committed?
I did.
Okay. And do you recall the sleeper hold? It was on a detective at a demonstration. Was what you saw consistent with your findings in this case?
Yes.
That the sleeper hold by wrapping the arm around somebody's neck and cutting off blood flow to the brain was the cause of death in this case?
Yes.
Okay. Concerning Elizabeth Griffith, Dr. Barr, was there anything in the toxicology screen that contributed to your diagnosis in this case, or was that another one of these things that was ruled out as a possible cause of death?
The only thing that was positive in her toxicology report were things that you would expect to see in a decomposing body, metabolites of decomposition. There were no illicit substances or anything else that I could conclude that caused her death.
When you were doing your examination of Elizabeth, did you find any defensive wounds on her hands?
I did not.
Now, Dr. Barr, when you're doing an autopsy, do you also, as part of that process, look for indication of sexual abuse or sexual violence against the decedent?
Yes.
Why do you do that?
We do that in many homicide cases, especially if we suspect there may be sexual activity prior to, if it's documented or if it's suspected.
In your autopsy of Elizabeth Griffith, was it possible to determine whether or not sexual violence or sexual abuse had happened prior to her death?
As with all cases where we suspect any kind of sexual activity, we did perform a sexual activity or a rape kit on Elizabeth Griffith, but I was not expecting to see any findings due to the nature of the decomposition of her body. Any evidence that would have been left behind at the time of any kind of sexual activity would also deteriorate over time and decompose as well. And we did not find anything.
Is that a reference to biological material like sperm?
Yes.
So, and do you know, based on your training and experience, Dr. Barr, how long you would expect sperm, that kind of evidence, to last in a decedent?
It typically starts to break down in the first couple of days. By day 3, the tails and the heads have separated, and after a week or so, with the vigorous insect activity, especially in genital regions and mucosal regions, you would expect that to be obscured.
Because of the insect activity?
Yes.
Okay. And what about physical trauma? Was it possible to determine whether or not physical trauma to, for example, Elizabeth's genitals had happened, or was decomposition too much?
So we did examine thoroughly the genital region, and it was difficult, if not impossible, to make a determination if there was any type of tears based on the extent of decomposition.
So, Dr. Barr, based on what you've described to us, this process of elimination of other causes of death and your affirmative examination of Elizabeth Griffith, based on your education, training, and experience, and within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, were you able to determine Elizabeth Griffith's cause of death.
Yes.
What was that?
It was cervical compression with the mechanism being asphyxia.
Dr. Barr, the move that we've talked about, this, you called it the sleeper hold, I think?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you know why it's called that typically?
Basically, when someone is put into a sleeper hold, compression of these carotid arteries and the jugular veins deprive the oxygen to the brain, and it takes roughly 10 to 15 seconds for someone to become unconscious. So it's a relatively quick process of rendering someone unconscious, although death doesn't occur within 10 to 15 seconds.
A sleeper hold can be applied and the carotid artery can be closed off and someone loses consciousness, but they don't necessarily die.
Correct.
If pressure is continued on the carotid artery and it's closed off, does that then lead to death?
So if pressure is maintained for 2 to 3 minutes or more, then you start to get hypoxic changes in the brain material. That's lack of oxygen to the brain, and the brain tissue starts to die. And relatively soon thereafter, you would have death.
So it's 2 to 3 minutes for that process to start. Do you know, based on your training and experience, Dr. Barr, how long in a range it would take to kill somebody by maintaining that sleeper hold?
I would say within 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay. And applying that, was it 11 or 12 pounds of pressure?
11 pounds of pressure.
Okay. Now, Dr. Barr, did you also perform an autopsy on someone known as Stacy Hicks, aka Stacy Stanley?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did that process start the same way you've already described to us, with an examination of the body as it was received at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office?
Exactly the same.
Okay. And photographed in its state as it was brought in?
Yes.
And then were items of clothing removed from Stacy?
Yes.
And then photographed again?
Yes.
Okay. Joint Defense Counsel States Exhibit 365. 366. 367, 368, 369, 370. And 371, which are photographs. Dr. Barr, I'm going to hand you Stacy Exhibit 365. Like for Elizabeth Griffith, for Stacy, did you write a report documenting your findings of this autopsy?
Yes, I did.
So what is 365 that I just handed to you?
States Exhibit 365 is a representation, is a copy of the examination I did on Stacy Hicks, case number OU 2016-00246. The first page is the anatomic diagnoses and the cause of death. The following 3 pages, again signed by me, are the detailed external and internal examinations. And then the final 4 pages are the toxicology report as submitted by Dr. Schuler.
Okay, and as with any case, and you mentioned specifically with Elizabeth, the toxicology report is something you rely on in making your ultimate determination as to a cause of death. Is that correct?
Yes.
going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 366. What is that?
State's Exhibit 366 is a copy of Dr. Schuler's toxicology report, which is 4 pages long, and then the 5th page is a send-out laboratory test that was sent to Access Forensic Toxicology Laboratory, and that would be representative of State's Exhibit 366 for Stacy Hicks.
So State's Exhibit 366, is that an updated or a corrected toxicology report as to the one that was initially or originally attached to your autopsy?
I wouldn't say corrected, but updated, definitely. There was a send-out test that we wanted to make sure of certain things.
So you indicated, Dr. Barr, that when a body is decomposing, there are positives, sometimes positive indicators on a toxicology screen that is part of the natural decomposition. Is that right?
That's correct.
And if you receive a positive on certain things, is that sometimes sent out by the toxicology lab for confirmation as to whether that was there or not?
Yes.
All right. And is that what happened in this case? There was an initial positive, then it was sent out to confirm whether that was true or not?
Yes.
Okay. Could you explain that to us? Because I think that factors into your, or could factor into your ultimate conclusion. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So again, the majority of the things that were positive in Stacy Hicks' toxicology report were things that we would expect to see in a decomposing body. A lot of the same metabolites and that type of thing, with the exception of one on our screen. Buprenorphine was screened as positive, and buprenorphine is a powerful opioid that is used for chronic pain, as well as it's used for people to battle their addiction to opioids. It's used as a supplement to people who are trying to get off of opioids. And our first initial screening screened that as positive, so we sent additional samples out to a forensic toxicology laboratory to verify and quantify if that particular substance was in her blood. And both of those metabolites came back as negative, and it was determined that buprenorphine can also cross-react in a screening process to give you a false positive. And that's what happened in this case.
So there was no buprenorphine in Stacy's body?
No.
Okay. Now, Stacy Exhibit 365 and 366, are those true and accurate copies of those two documents?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And are those both kept in the ordinary course of business at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes, they are.
Dr. Barr, I'm going to hand you the mark for identification purposes as Stacy Exhibit 367. You recognize what's in that photograph?
Yes, I do.
Who's that?
State's Exhibit 367 is a photograph of Stacy Hicks as she presented to the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office. This is after her clothing had been documented and removed, and it is the case number is also in the photograph depicting that this is Stacy Hicks.
Okay. And the identification for Stacy Hicks, was that done by a family member, or do you know?
The identification of Stacy Hicks, we were able to recover fingerprints from Stacy, and one of our fingerprint investigators was able to make a match through a database.
And do you know whether or not she was also identified by family members, or is that not part of what you knew?
That I'm not aware of.
Okay. So, Dr. Barr, could you take us through your examination of Stacy, please?
So during my external examination, Ms. Hicks was wearing a long sleeve blue patterned shirt, a blue camisole tank top, black and green brassiere, a denim skirt which was up around her hips. with a black belt. She had black boots on and black socks. There was also a white knit scarf that was wrapped several times around her neck. Beneath that scarf, after we photographed it and sequentially removed it, there was also a leather, like a leather band, like a necklace, a tight necklace type of leather band. And she also had quite vigorous insect activity about the face. The nose, the eyes, the mouth were pretty well obscured, as well as the genital region. We were also able to identify, she was wearing rings on her left hand. There was an earring in the bag with her. She had a couple of bracelets on, I believe on the right wrist. And she also had a series of tattoos. There were tattoos about her left hand, left forearm, around her right wrist. She had one in the back of the neck in the midline, and another tattoo in the mid-upper back.
Okay. Did you, after making these observations of Stacy's body as it was brought to you, did you then do this external examination to see if there was any obvious cause or contributor to death?
Yes.
And how did that go?
So the external examination, once everything had been removed and some of the insect activity had been removed, the only marking on the body, there were no signs of penetrating injuries like stab wounds or gunshot wounds, that type of thing. There were no indications of broken bones or anything of that nature. There was just, again, blanching around the neck underneath this white knit scarf.
What happened next in your examination?
So again, it would lead someone, based on the way she's found and with something wrapped around her neck with a blanching furrow underneath it, would lead you to believe that this is probably an asphyxial death. It was similar to the previous case. And so internal examination was done and systematically went through each organ system to rule out whether or not there was any indication of natural or catastrophic disease, and document all of the findings, and then pay special attention once again to the anterior neck, the front of the neck, and the posterior neck to see if there are any injuries associated with her neck, including hemorrhage in those strap muscles I described, or the soft tissues, as well as the hyoid bone and the cartilage that's represents the larynx and the windpipe.
Dr. Barr, did you observe any catastrophic or natural disease as part of this examination that you did?
I did not.
Okay, so you could rule that out, heart attack, things like that, as a potential cause of death. Is that correct?
Correct. She had apparently had a gastric bypass surgery. That was one thing I documented. And she had a tubal ligation, but those were the only indications that were outside of anything normal inside of her internal anatomy.
Okay. Then did you look for the cartilage in the neck and the hyoid bone, as you've already described to us?
Yes, I did.
What were your findings there?
Once again, she had no bleeding in the strap muscles, no hemorrhage, and there were no fractures of the hyoid bone or the thyroid or cricoid cartilage, the two cartilage areas that are in the area that would be damaged for manual strangulation or by other means.
So based on that, Dr. Barr, it didn't seem likely that this was those two methods you described previously, the arm bar or the face-to-face hands-on neck. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Anything else of note in your findings in your internal examination of Stacy Hicks, aka Stacy Stanley?
She had some pooling of like decomposition in the soft tissues towards the right side of under the skin, and that It's possible that could have been previous injury. It's highly unlikely because it's not consistent with the pattern that we see. But there was some darkening to the soft tissue over in this area, the right upper chest, and based on the decomposition process, and I'm not sure what position the body was found in, that could just be pooling of blood post-mortem.
So similar to Elizabeth, no external injuries that would indicate a cause of death, no damage to the cartilage or the highway bone in the neck. You took photographs, or photographs were taken, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Dr. Barr, I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 368. What is that, please?
State's Exhibit 368 is a photograph of the neck area of Stacy Hicks as she appeared to the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office with that white knit scarf around her neck. In this photograph, where the ruler is on the left side of the photograph would be the ear and the top of her head, the right ear and the top of her, leading towards the top of her head, and to the right of the photograph would be her shoulder and chest, and you can see that she's still wearing the clothing that she was wearing.
Dr. Barr, is that a fair and accurate representation of that part of Stacy that you have just described to us from when you performed your autopsy?
Yes, it is.
Judge, may we publish the photograph?
Any objection?
No objection.
You may.
So Dr. Barr, to the left, as we're looking at this, that's Stacy's head, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in the center, where that white material is, that's what this material you described as scarf, I think you called it?
Yes.
It was around her neck?
Yes.
Okay. And is that, as we're looking at this photograph, is that how Stacy, the state she was brought to the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Judge. State's Exhibit 369.
Yes.
What is that, please?
State's Exhibit 369 is a photograph of Stacy Hicks from the shoulder to the top of the head. In the photograph, the ruler is adjacent to the neck area. This is a photograph of the same area, but only widened, so that now we have the entire face or the right side of the face, I should say, and the upper chest in the photograph. At the top of the photograph is where her mouth is, and to the left of that would be the nose, and then the eyes. You can see the vigorous insect activity, and towards the middle of the bottom would be her right ear, also with vigorous insect activity, and then her chest would be to the right.
So Dr. Barr, in this particular exhibit, now that we've got, this is State's Exhibit 369, now that we've got a farther out shot, we can see it appears in the photograph as if the scarf that you described around Stacy's neck goes all the way around. We can see that a little more clearly in this photo, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, is that a fair and accurate representation of Stacy for this particular part of her body from when you were performing your autopsy?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. State's Exhibit 370. What is that, please?
State's Exhibit 370 is once again a photograph of the neck region of Stacy Hicks. This is after the removal of the white knit scarf that was wrapped around her neck, and also that leather band I had described that was underneath the scarf. And in this photograph, once again, her head would be to the left of the photograph and her chest would be to the right of the photograph.
So similar with what you described with Elizabeth, when something is on a body, when it's undergoing decomposition, it can leave that blanching as you've described it. Is that right?
Yes, it can.
Okay. Is that a fair and accurate representation of that area of Stacy's body from when you did your autopsy?
Yes.
Judge, with the court's permission, I'd like to publish that photo.
Any objection?
Objection.
It will be published.
And so, Dr. Barr, this was after, that white area in the center is Stacy's neck, is that right?
Yes.
And this was after that ligature had been removed, is that right?
Correct.
So, based on what you found here, this blanching, and based on that ligature around Stacy's neck, what did that indicate to you?
I was in the same thought process. This looks like this could be a soft ligature event, cervical compression of some type with asphyxia, whether it was done by the ligature or whether it was done again by a sleeper hold, that would be yet to be determined.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Judge. State's Exhibit 371. What is that, please?
State's Exhibit 371 is a photograph of the right hand and with sort of focusing on the fingernails of Stacy Hicks as they appeared.
And do you look, when you're doing an examination, an external examination in an autopsy, do you look for defensive hand wounds?
Yes, we do.
And things of that nature. Did you find any on Stacy?
I did not.
Okay. State's Exhibit, that was 371, is that right?
Yes, State's
Is that
Exhibit
a fair and
371.
accurate representation of that part of Stacy's body from your autopsy?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Dr. Barr, as part of the autopsy, did you try and determine whether or not sexual trauma or sexual assault had occurred prior to death?
Yes.
And what were your findings in that regard?
The findings were, again, we took swabs from all the pertinent areas, the mouth, the vaginal area, and the rectal area. And once again, they came back inconclusive, or negative, I should say.
Okay. And again, with the passage of time, is that surprising to you that with so many days gone by that you would not be able to find that kind of evidence if it existed in the first place?
Correct, especially with the amount of insect activity.
Okay. So, Dr. Barr, based on the information you've provided to us, your consideration of the toxicology screen, your internal and external examination of Stacy's body, based on your education, training, and experience, and within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, did you determine what Stacy Hicks, aka Stacy Stanley's cause of death was?
Yes.
What was that?
Once again, cervical compression, and the mechanism being asphyxia.
Now, we've talked about that being consistent with, one of the ways that could be caused is the sleeper hold that you've described to us. Could that also be caused by a soft ligature?
Yes, it could.
The type that was actually found by you wrapped around Stacy's neck. Is that correct?
It very well could, yes.
Okay. that in the same way that a person's arm can cut off the carotid artery, if something is wrapped around a person's neck and pressure then applied, that can also cause the carotid to be cut off and oxygen to not get to the brain. Is that right?
Yes.
And if that was the case, doctor, would you expect the same findings, meaning that you wouldn't have damage to the cartilage or to the hyoid bone in the neck?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Barr, after completing your autopsies in this case, were those findings transmitted to the Ashland County coroner?
Yes.
And in this case, Dr. Barr, did you conduct the autopsies that you've testified to for Elizabeth and for Stacy at the direction of the Ashland County coroner?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Barr, you indicated previously that, well, let me ask you like this. What we've discussed in your process of doing this autopsy, is that the only thing that happens with the body of a decedent when they come to, for in this case, the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office?
Not sure I understand your question.
Is evidence collected from the bodies that's then transported sometimes someplace else so it can be compared to other things?
Yes.
Was that done in this case?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Things like a DNA standard of the decedents, evidence of that nature was collected in this case and then provided to law enforcement in Ashland County, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. For comparison later by someone else, not done by you, is that fair to say?
Yes, as a consulting agency, we're doing this as a subcontractor, and so at the direction of Ashland County Coroner's Office, it would be standard to collect these items in a homicide, possible homicide case anyway.
DNA standard and other kinds of biological evidence?
Yes.
Okay. And so to your knowledge, Dr. Barr, were DNA standards taken from Elizabeth and from Stacy in this case? Okay. Thank you, Doctor.
Cross-examined.
Dr. Barr, you described when you were talking about Elizabeth Griffith, you described, I guess what's called a sleeper hold, where the arm, one arm and the other is applied around the neck and actually the throat, middle of the throat, kind of down in the elbow joint, I'll say. If that hold is applied for a period of time and let loose, can a person go kind of unconscious and slump, still be alive?
Yes, after 10 to 15 seconds or so, they would lose consciousness, but if the pressure was released, they could come back to consciousness.
And then if reapplied again and held on for a period of time, that would eventually cause death. Not eventually, but soon cause death. Is that correct?
If the pressure were maintained for 3 to 5 minutes.
I hear when you said sleeper hold, it reminded me of when I was a youngster and go to professional wrestling matches. They would talk about the sleeper hold and the hold apply, and kind of go down like that, and they let him loose, and lay there for a little bit, get back up, and they wrestle again. That's what you described.
Yes, I think that's where the term actually comes from.
That's what I thought, yes. Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Barr.
Thank you, sir.
Any redirect, Mr. McNamara?
Dr. Barr, when somebody dies, are their bowels, do their bowels evacuate? If there's material in there to evacuate?
I've seen it both ways.
Okay, so when someone dies, their bowels can evacuate, is that fair?
They can, yes.
Thank you, doctor. You're excused.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
It's now 12:27 on the courtroom clock. We're going to take our lunch recess. Please be back in the jury room by 1:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss this case. Don't form any opinions or conclusions. Don't look at any media coverage. And please comply with the court's admonitions. We'll be in recess until 1:30 p.m.